Can we turn to the petition now and ask the petitioners at the bar to speak?
Thank you, Moderator. Moderator, Commissioners of Assembly, visitors and guests, I'm Neil McLennan, Session Clerk at St Andrew's Church in Bo'ness, and I'm joined this afternoon by Andrew Wells, a member of our congregation. Neither of us are commissioners to the Assembly, so we have no numbers to declare. Unaccustomed as I am is normally the phrase that ends to public speaking. It's not strictly true in my case. I've done more than my fair share of that. However, I might say, unaccustomed as I am to wearing a shirt and tie, and for what passes as a suit, I find myself here representing the views of our Kirk session and seeking your support in the enfranchisement of members of our congregation who participate with us regularly online. Our congregation has been live streaming for over 15 years. It predates the COVID times by over a decade and is no stopgap measure. It is part and parcel of our ministry, mission and outreach. Reverends Bogle, Lane, Orr, Brown, Nielsen, Cook, Astos, Wanderman, Gunn are just some of those who will find themselves in the digital archives of our congregation as ministers, locums, probationers or interim moderators. Notably absent from this list is Dr. Barclay, the convener, who is a former probationer with us. And regretfully, convener, and there's no easy way to say this, your tenure with us was in a time before records began. Digital records, anyway. This roll call, however, is more than a list of ministers. It is an expression of the longevity, reach, acceptance and perseverance of our work and purpose in providing this online extension to our ministry. We work very hard in trying to ensure that folks online have as rich and as deep an experience as those present in person. We work very hard to ensure that those online are not simply voyeurs of others worshipping in a faraway place, but rather we regard those online as bona fide congregants in equal standing to those present in person. I want to be clear that in our petition we use the word member to mean someone on the congregational roll, having joined via any of the approved means, most usually public declaration of faith. In that regard, this petition does not apply to just anyone or everyone who joins us online. It pertains particularly to those who join online and are communicant members or adherents of the congregation. To put it another way, this petition refers to folks who are already entitled to vote were they present in person, but who would otherwise be ineligible to cast a vote if they joined the same service and meeting in an online or hybrid way. Rather than have me wax lyrical with yet more persuasive arguments and innumerable worthy reasons, I'd like to introduce Andrew Wells, and we are grateful to Andrew's employer for allowing him time off today to be with us, for such is the reality of life. Andrew is 22 and a regular member of our congregation. Andrew.
Thank you. I have 3 examples from my story to share, a bit about how I got involved with the congregation at Bo'ness St Andrews and how I feel that it makes sense for online attenders to have a vote, online members rather, to have a vote in any sort of congregational vote. And I also feel like this week's hybrid assembly is quite a good example of how that can work. I was born and bred in North East Fife and only ever lived in 2 other places, Ottawa in Canada and Aberdeen, where I now live. I've never lived remotely close to Bo'ness, and until I found their online live stream, I'd never heard of the place. However, I am now proud to say that I am a communicant member of Bo'ness St Andrews Parish Church. I became a regular attender online during the COVID period and remained after developing a genuine fellowship with our congregation alongside our minister, Reverend Derek Gunn, and you, our session clerk, Neil. Virtual attendance became an attractive option for me as it allowed me to worship God and build my relationship with the church in a way that complements my life outside of it. Like many young people who relocated for university and work, I move around quite a lot, particularly at weekends, visiting my parents back in Fife, seeing friends in other cities and going to the football. I'm a Dundee United fan, so let's not talk about that. My geography changes, but my ability to join in genuine fellowship with our congregation does not, as I can take my laptop and or my phone with me wherever I go. This fellowship does, however, extend to the 5 or 6 times a year I find myself in the Central Belt on Sunday, and I travel to Bo'ness to attend in person. I took my vows to be a church member just under a year ago, and I can say with absolute certainty that if online church was not a thing, I would not be here speaking today as a communicant member of the Church of Scotland. I decided that after receiving such a real warm welcome online, that I wanted to actively participate in worship as a member of the church. I have since participated in worship remotely by reading gospel readings in real time on Zoom, or pre-recording them, and they will be played during the service, and this is also made available to those joining online. I should also add that when I decided to join the church, I did so in person. However, I feel a real fellowship when joining online, as we are very lucky to have a chatbot feature on our church's website where online attenders can communicate with other attenders online and those in person. I feel it's also worth noting that despite living in Aberdeen, I attend Bowness St Andrews. Our church will soon go into union with other churches in Bowness, and I do plan on relocating my membership. However, I still plan on attending mostly remotely. So if there's anyone from Aberdeen here, please come say hi. Allowing online members to vote in congregational meetings is also hugely symbolic, as it shows that we really are valued members of the church, the same as our peers who attend in person. It is also of note that the Church of Scotland's magazine, Life and Work, recently shared an article in the youth column where I wrote about my experience as a young leader at a Boys Brigade company in Aberdeen. At the top is an extracted quote: "There is so much more to church than just a Sunday morning," which I feel is particularly relevant as I speak here just now. I hope my words here demonstrate the value that remotely accessing church can bring as our current and potential members, and as I mentioned previously, the significance of allowing us to vote in congregational matters, both in the sense of our votes counting and in a symbolic sense, showing that our fellowship is real and valued as much as those who attend in person. I hope this will enable others to have the opportunity that I had, and do still have, to experience God's love and all the benefits that the church can bring, while at no point feeling less different or less important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. The Legal Questions Committee will soon be presenting measures, maybe soon, in the updated Church Courts Act for provision for various meeting formats in person, online and hybrid, a combination of the two, for the courts of the church. That's super, and we think it's a great development. In our petition, we now invite the Legal Questions Committee to turn their attention to congregational meetings and determine equivalent provisions for its meeting formats. We recognise it's not as simple as copying and pasting, for example, the Church Courts Act work into existing legislation for congregational meetings, and so we invite the Legal Questions Committee to consider what appropriate steps might be and to report back. I'd like now to turn to the timetable. This is a critical time for congregations. Our deliberations earlier today have demonstrated that. Some congregational adjustments under the mission planning process have already happened, and in the next 48 or so months, we're under no illusion there will be many more. Time is of the essence, and we believe this gap in equivalence can't wait for another year until the next assembly. Too much will happen in the next 12 months. This is why we're asking for the Legal Questions Committee to return to a Commission of Assembly by November. Some of you might have questions about technology and identity and communication. These are all important matters, and I'm sure will come under the scrutiny of the committee's considerations. Some of you might know my employer provides digital and hybrid services to this General Assembly and a number of presbyteries, and in saying this, I declare a professional interest to the general principles here. But personally speaking, I'm happy to offer any support to the committee if that's of any help in their work documenting viable protocols. As I close, I note, as you all might have, the stark contrast between the technological nature of this petition and the language in which it is necessarily couched. As I looked up the dictionary to check the meaning of the word "shuath," I happened upon one of its anagrams, wheesht, which is what I now propose to do. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Thank you both, Neil and Andrew, and poor you taking a day off to sit through all of this. Well done, well done. Where am I going now? Oh yes, does the Assembly receive the petition? We have a couple of questions. First of all, from Derek Gunn.
Microphone 52. I'm Derek Gunn, Commissioner number 227. It was originally showing me as retired, well, actually as the active Minister of Airdrie Clarkson, from which I retired a number of years ago. And the moderator this morning was saying, who am I? And sometimes I wonder who I am. Yes, I'm retired. It says, in various places. And yet I'm still working. I'm working very, very happily as the interim moderator and local minister at Bowness St Andrews. During COVID, there was a particular ability to do all sorts of things. There was an ability to do things which, with the help of Neil, I was able to become even more technically skilled than I was previously. That was not necessarily a big jump. But one of the things that enabled me to do was to make meaningful contacts, which kept on long after. And it valued people in that sort of way, because of who they were, where they were. And I was able to converse with people about preparing funerals when they were in Southampton. Why is this relevant to what I'm saying today? We have a much more mobile society, and yet sometimes, in terms of continuity, people want to keep continuity with a place, and that is about becoming members. That's about becoming a part of that body, and that's what's important. I stood there, and Andrew and another young man who's in the assembly here stood before me and took their vows, both very involved in online things. And I admitted them as communicant members, asking them to promise to play their part, and they both have done. It seems unfair of me to then turn round and say to them, if I'm moderating at a meeting, that you are not entitled to play your full part that you promised to do. I feel dishonest. I am not complaining about anything that's been done by those who've made arrangements for General Assemblies. I think it's wonderful what you managed to achieve. And I don't think I'm pushing against a closed door. I think I'm pushing against a very easily open door, just to extend this work, but to do it in a right and proper way that safeguards the rights of members and that safeguards all the governance of the church. And that is why I'm very much in support of the petition, which is not asking for that decision to be made today, but to be given back to legal questions so that it can be properly written and prepared. Just to finish, and then I'll wheesht Neil. I'm going to remember that Sunday. I'm going to finish by saying that in the start of every Sunday morning service, I say to people, welcome to those who are gathered together as the body of Christ, face to face, those who are gathered online, and those who will listen to recordings in the future. And when I'm doing that, I'm very conscious that some of those people are members. Not all young people like Andrew, but people who have been lifelong members are now in care homes, who are now in their own homes, unable to get out. If we give them the ordinances of worship, surely we respect also their membership. I believe that the Legal Questions Committee is not going to oppose this motion, and I applaud them for the work they have previously done in this sort of area. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you. We have two requests to speak. First of all, from Brian Kerr, and then from Stuart Irvine.
Moderator Kerr 231. I am Minister in Lanark, and I'm also Deputy Clerk to the Presbytery of Forth Valley in Clydesdale, which, despite having offices in Hamilton, covers such dark and distant places and lands as Bowness. And we are very privileged in our presbytery and very fortunate to have the skills of Neil and the team at Bowness St Andrews to aid us in our presbytery life. And this petition comes, it seems to me, well thought out, well considered, and with a wealth of technical expertise behind it, which means, in my mind anyway, this ought to be possible. This ought to be something that we can do, with all the safeguards, with all the challenges that we might throw at it. but we're able to do it for such big decisions in this Assembly as sending something down under a Double Barrier Act earlier on. We've been able to stand up and say no to racism and all sorts of different things over these last few days and more besides. Why, when we are talking about significant matters in the life of a congregation, as to what their life will be like in the future, as to whether their building ought to continue to be open or disposed of and the move elsewhere, why should we disenfranchise people? If we believe our statistics that were presented earlier on today, and I have no reason not to believe them, for they have been compiled very well and carefully by the Assembly trustees and the statistician, 40% of our church members, or those who attend, worship online. Not 1%, 40%. 60,000 worship in person and 45,000 worship online. Is that not a significant proportion of those who join us each week, many of whom will be members, that we ought not to disenfranchise? This is an opportunity to explore, an opportunity to do things well and to put safeguards in place so that in this season of change within the church, everyone can have their say and play their part in ensuring that the mission, God's mission, through this church can continue in these communities. Moderator, I urge Assembly to support this petition, to accept that this comes with the gift of technical expertise and just how this might be done and how it might be achieved safely and in good order, so that we can come back at a future date and actually say to some of those who join online and are unable to meet face-to-face that their voice, their vote and their say is still very much at the heart of who we are as a church. Moderator, I urge Assembly to support this petition.
Thank you. Mr. Irvine.
Yep, Irvine 179 would say that I welcome this, and with that a comment and just to follow a brief question, but I'm not quite sure if that question should be pointed to the petitioner or to the convener. Firstly, by way of comment, as I said, I welcome this, and I likewise think of both the pastoral and missional opportunities that come out of what is before us here. But the question is really one of practicalities, and it's the word simultaneous. We speak of those who join us online, and we're aware of those who might join us online after the effect. And that covers with it a missional and a pastoral opportunity. I'm thinking of members of my own church who work weekends because of their vocation. And so that simultaneous question, how can that be encompassing of those who, for obvious reasons, can't be either in the building or online at the same time? And so it's just how that practicality is worked out with a sympathy and a pastoral concern and care for those. So I don't know if that's a question to the petitioner or to the convener, or if they want to ping-pong it back and forth between them, but just to ask about that word simultaneous.
Neil, any thoughts?
I think if any of you have ever watched Britain's Got Talent and programmes of that ilk, and the line, if you're watching this on replay, please do not vote, the lines have closed, might be the simplest way to deal with that. But I do recognise the general point that watching and taking part in online worship still requires you to be available at 10:30 on a Sunday morning. And if that's not the pattern for everybody. And I think my approach at this stage to be, well, let's get this matter dealt with. Let's understand how it works, and perhaps on a future occasion, I may well be back here with a different proposition, something along the lines of what Mr. Irvine proposes. Thank you.
Grant, as convener, can I ask you for your thoughts? Are you willing to accept this?
The petition?
Yes. 166, moderator, the aged, Grant Barclay. I should say that Mr McClellan brought this to me as convener relatively recently, and I'm most grateful to him for the opportunities we've had to discuss this. However, this has so far gone nowhere near the Legal Questions Committee. Commissioners will see that even in Mr Irvin's question, a whole range of practical and legal issues suddenly erupts, which needs to be considered carefully by the committee. The committee is, however, prepared, as I understand it. You can see the carefree and sunny disposition of a retiring convener before you, but I understand that those who are watching online, as it happens, and who will be involved in this, will undertake to complete the work in order to bring this to a Commission of Assembly before the end of November. And so on that basis, I do not propose to oppose this at all. Given that there is a resource implication in holding a Commission of Assembly, I have a slight principled concern with simply accepting it as it stands, because it looks very much as though I play fast and loose with the Church's money, and therefore it might actually be better for there to be a vote so that this goes with the proper authority of the General Assembly for the consideration of the matter and the holding of a Commission of Assembly. But saying that, I'm most grateful to Mr McLennan and think that the Legal Questions Committee will be happy to consider the issues which flow from this question.
I note that Neil passed you the petition in paper form, so that's appropriate for somebody as old. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So we do need to move to a vote. The vote needs to be recorded, and therefore the vote will be an electronic vote.
Moderator, Mayor 567. As before, this will be an electronic vote with commissioners in the hall voting 1 for the petition in the name of Mr McLennan, 2 against, and those online pressing the for or against buttons in the Assembly hub. The vote is now open. Ten seconds remain. The vote is now closed.
They're voting in favour of the petition, or for the petition, 234, against 8. The petition is carried. And I thank you both, Neil and Andrew, for coming today and for presenting the petition. And I'm sure your day off is now quite profitable. Thank you. Yes. Okay. The wise words of the lady, or it should be wise words of the woman on my white, is that the Legal Questions Committee report ought to be remaindered.